Welcome to the Curious About Nature podcast. This is a podcast for folks who want to connect with nature and rewild childhood. Hosted by Rachel Mills, Buttercup Learning's founder, an educator with 20 plus years of experience with a passion for animation, the natural world and conservation. Rachel focuses on getting digital kids outdoors and having fun in nature, promoting well-being and a can-do attitude to local wildlife conservation and sustainable living. Join her and her guests for their stories, experiences, and tips to support outdoor learning and nature connection.
Welcome to the Curious About Nature podcast. This month we're joined by Katie, Stacey and Luke Massey, and they're going to talk to us a little bit about their journey living in Asturias in northern Spain, where they've embarked on a journey with their kids, Rowan and Albus, to live sustainably and alongside nature. Hi there, guys.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks very much for inviting us on.
You're very welcome. I'm really interested about why you moved to Spain. What was the impetus for that start of your journey?
I'll kickstart this. It's sometimes it's how far do we go back? So before we arrived in Asturias, Luke and I were traveling the world telling kind of conservation and nature stories. Luke's a photographer, cameraman, and I was a writer, and I was writing these stories that went along with Luke's photos. And we didn't need to be in the UK for that. So we were looking for a base that had a bit more nature, a bit more wilderness than the UK. And we'd done some work in the south of Spain on a fabulous cat called the Iberian lynx. At the time, it was the rarest cat in the world. I don't think it is anymore.
It's thanks to very successful conservation, captive breeding. I think there's like 2,000 or more now, and there was like 120 when we worked with it.
Yeah, so really one of the better conservation success stories that we told. And we really fell in love with Spain, but the south was very hot and it's only really getting hotter. And Luke had actually always wanted to come to the north, so we did a bit of a road trip and we fell in love with Asturias. And that was how we found ourselves here. We moved here in January 2018. We rented actually just over the valley from where we live now. And pretty soon after arriving, we knew this was where we wanted to be. So we started looking. We became friends with a local farmer who took us under his wing. We wanted to get a bit of a better grasp of the language and also the landscape and local life. And he very kindly showed us the ropes locally. And it was through him he showed us this property, Wild Finca. At the time, it wasn't called that. But one of our big dreams was to create our own nature reserve. And yeah, it had that potential. It was previously a dairy farm, wasn't it?
Yeah, but going through this, the guy had retired, so he'd let other people graze it. So it was a mix of kind of meat horses, huge, big, fat horses, and cows just roaming the land. And yeah, but it was reverting to nature in parts already. So for us, it was basically a blank canvas, but with the startings of a beautiful painting on it. Potentially.
Had you done anything like this before?
I've always been interested in nature, and then I think like age 12, 13, I started volunteering at a nature reserve in the UK and did that for 7 years. And I went to university to do wildlife conservation, but actually only lasted a year because my photography and filming career kicked off just pre going to university. So I took a gap year and never went back. But yeah, I guess through our work, towards the end of my career, but towards the end when we were traveling lots, we did a lot of work on rewilding projects. Which was NEP, which is like the famous rewilding project in the UK in Sussex. And that was what really inspired us, because that was, I don't know if the first time we went there, we just bought this place or we just looked at this place. Maybe we just looked at it. So it was there in the back of our mind. And then rewilding, you're talking, yes, that's 8 years ago when NEP was really kicking off. Isabella Tree's book, Wilding, had just come out. So we'd both read that. And it was more in our nature realm. Lots of people were talking about rewilding and stuff. And for us, then it really thought we could do something similar to that, but we could never do that in the UK. We just don't have the funds or the access to land. Whereas here, it's a lot more accessible, but obviously a lot more smaller scale as well. NEP, we're not even 1%, or NEP, maybe now we are 1% of NEP, but NEP's 1,000 hectares or something like that, 2,000 more or less. Whereas we are 30 acres and with potential to grow further. but we're never going to reach that level.
Mm.
So yeah, we hadn't really done it physically on before, but we've done lots of reading and I guess field trips, you could call it, on the ground learning. I call it sponge learning, where you basically visit a project, you speak to the people and you absorb it, what they're doing, and then implement what you've learned here.
Yeah, so it sounds like you've had a lot of support from local people as well.
It's been a mix.
A bit.
Into the project, the local farmer I think he was fascinated by us. What are this young British couple doing here? Most people, there's a big problem with land abandonment, with like the brain drain, where the younger generation are going to the cities. So to have a younger, at the time it was just the two of us, it was before our boys were born, to have a younger couple then choosing to take on a project like this, that
Bucking
was
the trend. I think locally now we're probably
confusing.
The youngest doing it. It's an aging population, and yeah, most of the young people, like our children's classmates, their parents, their grandparents are farmers, but the parents do actually proper jobs, let's call them. I'm not saying farming isn't, but like as in more kind of standardized normal jobs.
Yeah.
And they live in flats or houses in town as opposed to out in the campo, like the rural areas here.
And I think it's important to say that we don't class ourselves as farmers in the
farmers of
traditional
nature.
way. Yeah, we say we're doing here is we're farming for nature, and that's really important because we can't say this is the way to do it to
because
farmers because that's not what we're doing.
Our opinion, our main motivation for all of this is have as much higher level of biodiversity as possible. And on the scale of farming here, to do it profitably, the biodiversity would suffer. It's just physically impossible. Luckily, whether you agree with it or not, but locally here, EU subsidies make up a huge part of the income of most farmers. And farms are quite small scale. But if you took those subsidies away, it's very hard to basically make a living from farming in this area. It's very hilly, so you can't really do many crops. The weather's quite changeable. And then really all you're left with is meat farming, cattle, sheep, and sheep's dying out.
So farming in that respect was never really our vision. Our vision was always to farm for wildlife, increase the biodiversity, and then actually nature connection. So getting people back in contact, in connection with our natural world. I think people are very separate from it these days, even in rural areas, in rural landscapes such as this.
Curious to know what your day-to-day life is, especially as a family. Maybe there isn't a sort of regular pattern to it.
We do have some sort of routine. So both boys are now at the local school and the local nursery. So we drop them off around 9. If it depends, if Luke or I are dropping them off, then the other one. But mainly Luke will run around, do the small animals. So we've currently got geese, turkeys, ducks, chickens, dogs, and then on our bigger animals are cows and horses. On the whole, Luke is the mastermind behind the Wild Finca animals and movements and management because I work remotely. I will come back and do my emails and get on top of my work. However, today is a bit different because we had, and they're very good at just turning up, the vets have come to do the TB test for the cattle, and they came on Monday, and then they told us they were coming today, but we mentioned this was on, and they said, no, it's fine, we'll come after it. And of course, they've turned up right in the middle of it. In terms of the livestock, it can be super flexible, and it has to be. Sometimes we've had incidences where you look out the window and the cows are in the wrong field or the horses are on the footpath. We have a footpath that runs across our land. So suddenly everything has to stop because you have to go and catch the animals and put them back. But yeah, there's elements of routine and massively elements of flexibility as well, I'd say, in the day-to-day running of Wild Finca, shall we say.
Yeah, the kids are still quite young at the moment. Do they get involved in the project and in family life in terms of looking after the animals?
Yes, very much. They are very much involved. We have Roan, who's 5, and Albus, who is 2, and they do have their chores. Makes it sound a bit harder than it is. They'll be in charge of collecting the eggs from the chickens. They do help us in the vegetable garden. Help's a strong word because sometimes it'll be a case of you're planting your carrots and then you turn around and Albus is already harvesting them behind you. Not so helpful. But no, they're very hands on the landscape. And what's really been noticeable recently with Roan is that so Luke guides nature tours around the land and will often go and do the route, and we'll do it just as family walks. For example, we have a snake mat, which is just some I think, black material that you put on the ground, but because it obviously draws the heat, it attracts lots of snakes and slow worms. So the boys love to go and check that. And we'll do these routes, and Roan's learnt it so much. There are some kind of spots along the way that Luke will always describe or explain certain kind of flowers that he sees. And Roan's now learnt that and is saying it back to us. And if we've got friends, he actually leads the group now. We keep joking that soon Luke will be able to retire because Roan can step in and take over with the guiding. But Albus as well, I really enjoy my foraging. And yeah, you take the kids out into the woods and it's like being on a treasure hunt for them. So they're super engaged with that. And they also have way better eyes than me. And I think because they're closer to the ground, they're really good at spotting. So I call them like my little truffle children. How you have truffle pigs or truffle dogs, then yeah, my little truffle children. So no, they're really involved, and that's fortunate.
Yeah, I guess having a family that are as eager to be involved in the rewilding project just makes it that much more fun, doesn't it?
I think with kids as well, actually, they've just got that innate connection. So it's more a case of nurturing and not shutting it down, making sure there's the opportunity for them to explore that. Certainly from my experience, both boys were born with it.
Do you think that their childhood is going to be very different to your own, maybe? Or did you have sort of elements of nature in your own childhood growing up?
I was really fortunate, actually. I lived in quite a kind of small village, and my grandparents kept a flock of sheep, and they had a few cows that people would have a share in. It was all grass fed, and so I had that connection to that, and I did grow up with horses as well. Luke was a bit more in a town, but as soon as he got a bike, he was just so motivated to go out and find wildlife. And first and foremost, he was a naturalist and just loved finding wildlife. And then I think he stole his sister's camera once, and he tells the story that he took a photo of a kingfisher, and he was just so excited that then he could go back and show people, not just tell them what he'd seen, but then show them what he'd seen as well, even though it was this like tiny little blue dot in the middle of a very green frame, quite hard to see. But that was really the beginning for him. Was he was just captivated by the storytelling element of photography and how it then supported his actual storytelling of his experiences. So we were both actually, yeah, I'd say quite connected. My knowledge is still to this day is nowhere as vast as Luke's, but I recalled this story of traveling with some girlfriends around Australia, and they'd always get a bit nervous when I took the wheel because I had a tendency to, if I saw a bird, kind of veer off the wrong side of the road. So I was always like, I had an eye for things, but I didn't know what they were really until I met Luke, and then that was quite handy having like my in-house nature guide, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's amazing, isn't it, how quickly you pick these things up just by listening to others or experiencing it, like hands-on, definitely. Do you think there's any kind of positives or any things that you've learned by living where you are at the moment that maybe either changed your life or changed your attitude towards nature?
Yeah. So after the storytelling, the traveling that we were doing and the conservation storytelling, we had a lot of stories published, but they were only ever the success stories. And actually there were more negative, hopeless stories, shall we say. And they never, at the time, they'd never published them. They never ran with them. And at the time I felt that they needed a light shining on them, because if you don't know it's happening, you don't necessarily, care. But I think what has happened for me personally is actually coming and getting hands-on with the land and really physically being reconnected to the land. My hope and my kind of confidence in the fact that things can get better for the natural world has just I'm a very different person. Before I was quite negative and quite hopeless, if I'm completely honest. But since actually getting hands-on and being more active in kind of nature conservation, I think what really blows me away is how resilient nature is and how, given the opportunity, it does come back. So I'd say I've got a massive amount of hope for nature and the natural world now.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. What I'm doing at home myself with my family is on a tiny scale in our back garden, but I think we've done very basic stuff like not mowing our lawn. We hadn't actually done any cutting in 5 years and had just been tending and replanting and letting things be more natural and building wildlife ponds, that kind of thing, and hedgehog corridors. So things that people can do in towns and cities. And it doesn't take that long to notice that there's differences in the amount of wildlife that we've seen over the last 3 years in particular is huge compared to when we first moved into the property we live in now. It's amazing, just even small changes can have a positive impact, can't they?
Absolutely. There's this amazing quote by Jane Goodall, and it's, if you look at the world as a jigsaw and you envision that everyone's working on their little part of the jigsaw, and then when it all comes together, it becomes a bigger picture. We've actually come up against a lot of kind of negativity, because I think for us, we're quite big, but we're not in the great scheme of things. Like, everyone talks about landscape scale nature recovery, and that is fantastic. What else is landscape scale recovery? Lots of little people doing their part and coming together. That's how you create landscapes. So I'm all about everyone just doing what they can where they can.
So what's the most enjoyable part of where you live, do you think? What do you enjoy doing the most?
Oh gosh, lots of things. We're so blessed, really, in terms of what we can access. For me, I love being in the woods. I love going out mushroom foraging with my basket, and that is a great pleasure for me. I love spending time with our horses and our cows. I was a bit nervous about getting cows, but they are real characters. Yeah, I like them as well. Our vegetable garden, I certainly don't get to spend as much time in there, but reaping the rewards of it is such a pleasure. Like being able to cook with vegetables that we planted either from seed or that we bought at the local market is an incredible privilege. It's really hard. I can't choose one, I'm afraid. Lots.
Is there any big mistakes you made when you were getting started, or things that you still feel like you haven't quite got the grasp on yet?
Oh, I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. I can't think of one off the top of my head. And I would argue that everything we've done has led us to this position now. Any big mistakes?
Yes, environmentally.
Oh,
No,
God.
ecologically. Sorry,
Okay.
not big. Well, it depends what you class by big mistake, doesn't it?
No, I think we've learned as we've gone, and certainly things haven't necessarily, because we were talking yesterday about that plot where we planted the trees and they haven't done very well.
Yeah, but I was also going to say the goats.
Oh yeah, the goats were a mistake.
We came with 2 goats, and
Yeah.
that didn't last very long. They were like given to us actually by the farmer that showed us this place, and they were just a nightmare, kept escaping, eating all our trees. So we managed to rehome them. And then recently we decided to get some pygmy goats. So thinking, oh, pygmy, so they'll be easier. And it was like fine for 3 weeks. And the plan was basically, so 80% of wild Finca is for nature, and 20% is we have the trampoline, the play, like climbing frame, barbecue area, veg patch, stuff like that. So we thought that's where the pygmy goats will hang out. They didn't hang out.
So we didn't have to
Yeah.
or use
Yeah, gave me
vision
time, and they're
was-
cute. And the boys both agreed, despite being 2 and 5, that they were theirs. And they were theirs. Like, they fed them and they stroked them and stuff. But yeah, they were just a nightmare. And then some reason our dogs started being a nightmare with them. And it just, it became like an absolute disaster in terms of time, which time is valuable. And we're just spending our whole time catching goats, putting them back in, keeping the dogs away from the goats in. And it just, didn't work. So luckily we rehomed them, and goats will never set foot while we are here ever again.
And I really hope we learn our lesson this time.
You're the second family that said that to me, who've had either a rewilding project or a small holding in this case, and they told me the same thing, that they'd got various livestock and then goats and stuff, and they thought everything would be fine. This will help keep the grass sorted, and of course it didn't work out the way they thought either. I think maybe goats are just tricky animals.
Right? Like, it's famous that they do that, and I don't know why. We just don't believe. And a neighbour said to me, well, even when we didn't have goats, he said, "Buy goats, buy problems." That was literally like he said that, and it's true. So I think that probably, and not mistakes. We're learning as we go. So there's just little bits on the land where certain things we've done haven't worked so well. Other bits we have. Timing as well. Like, we've put lots of ponds in, and we put in. So now it's best to put ponds in winter, basically, because they fill up with the rain. But we put one in June a few years ago, and it never rained enough to fill it. And then the badgers found it, and they just tore the liner to shreds. So again, not really a big mistake, but like learning lessons that it was a big waste. The hole's still there, and I probably will line it or something one day, maybe this winter. But yeah, it was a waste of a liner, right? It got torn to shreds because I guess the badgers could smell some creature underneath, and it was just like, it was like a
Badger heaven.
yeah. So that, but not really like mistakes, so to speak. And I
Learning
think
curve,
before I
at times very steep learning curve.
yeah, and then just like day to day it changes, and then priorities and communication, which I think all families can work on communication. So there's certain things that Katie and I have different priorities, perhaps, which I think I'm getting better at. I'm a bit like I'm a pond addict, so I love putting ponds in. And I'd love to be digging ponds all day, every day at the minute. And I've got the liners downstairs and I've got holes ready to go. But my to-do list is like 4 bajillion things at the moment. And it's the ponds are at the back of my head. But I know at the minute I'm just piling through those to-do lists. And my reward, perhaps in January, will I get to dig a pond until...
But previously, the ponds would have been at the beginning of the list and everything else would have come afterwards. So that's been a good...
Yeah. It's hard because the thing I'd say to everyone is, and anyone who's doing it will know, but like being a parent isn't the easiest job in the world. Everyone knows that. Some people may disagree, but I think it is being present and being full on with them all the time and giving them the best life is like our main priority. And that's one of the reasons for living here. But also having a project like this, it is a huge job. It's basically a full-time job, but I don't earn any money out of it. And we are doing different things at the minute, like we've just just launched our first kind of online retreat that we're doing in the next few weeks, where we put it out to our newsletter and people can sign up. And we're basically going to teach people how to rewild, how to get closer to nature. And we're going to do more of those. So basically it can bring at least an income for me, because like later next month, I've got to go away for 10 days to Zambia on a job. And it'll probably be the last time I ever do a job like that. And I know once I'm on the ground, it'll be fantastic. But one, it takes away from my family, and two, it takes me away from this place. But it is a full-time job being here, and it's just keeping on top of that, but not letting it stress you out too much. I think that's what we're getting better at doing, and realizing at the end of the day, stuff does get done. On what day is it? Yeah, on Monday or Tuesday, I said, we're picking the boys up from school and we're going to the beach. Like, we're not doing farm things, because I think the problem is if you pick them up and you come back here, they are actually very helpful at the minute, because they've both got a little like pedal along tractor, and I've got loads of cement and mud and stuff to move. So they put it in there and they entertain themselves. But basically, when you pick them up from school, you can easily fall back into, oh, I'm just going to go. Katie might go inside and do some emails, or I'll go and do farm jobs, Finca jobs, whatever you want to call them. And that's not fair on the boys. So we took them to the beach and we had the most wonderful time, and probably the most epic rock pooling in my 33 years on this life. We found an octopus and we hung out with him for ages. We watched him hunt. I shoved my arm in and he put his like leg. Are they all legs? 8 of them. Their arm, leg. Anyway, everyone knows octopus have 8 of them. Put that on me and the boys just loved it. Then we found a cuttlefish and crabs and jellyfish on the beach. And that for us is like why we live here. We know we couldn't give them that life in the UK. And it's just reminding ourselves of that. And I think the social media, any life, everyone's social media perception perhaps isn't the most honest. Some people are very honest about it. But I guess like people see Wild Finca's Instagram or something and they'll say, oh, wow, look at that. The blue skies, the pot, like they're always having fun. But there is a ton of work that goes into it. And it's also dividing it. We love it and it's our life, but it's a hell of a lot of hard work. And we also have to get the balance right, that living here gives our kids a chance to grow up in this completely wild environment, which is amazing. But we always said we didn't want to force it on them either. I think me not growing up in it because my parents weren't really into nature, but as a young person growing up in the nature world, I saw older nature people, bird watchers, dragging their kids, and that's what they were doing, dragging their kids along. And I've still seen it now, and the kids are completely disengaged. And for us, we're doing it more of an immersion, and I hope they don't go away from nature. But at the minute, that is their innate thing. I pick them up from school and they want to go and check the snake mats. They want to pick up a slow worm. They want to find wasp spiders. But just letting them do it and not forcing them into it.
Yeah, I think it is interesting because sometimes, especially in the UK, people can romanticize nature and being wild and the rest of it, can't we? And I thought your point about not forcing children to do things, because I grew up in Middlesbrough, but we lived on the outskirts of North Yorkshire. So we'd spend the weekends on the moors, going for walks and Yorkshire Dales, that kind of thing. And revisited with my daughter for a week in a forest holiday recently. And I can remember when it got to teenage years, it did feel like that. Okay, it's Sunday, we're going out for a walk, and there was always that kind of resistance. But then once you got out, actually, I always really enjoyed it. And my daughter's the same, but our neighbours probably think we're completely crazy. I live in a village in North Somerset, And we go out for walks just before bedtime because that's when she wants to do it. And it really helps her to wind down and relax. And we just go for a 10-minute walk in the local field.
Mm-hmm.
Probably other parents think we're completely bonkers, but actually we found it really helps settle her. She's got sensory processing disorder, so it's her way of like calming down and regulating. But it has to be on her terms, because if we do it any other way, it's not enjoyable then. There's that resistance to it. So I think it is important that, like you said, that your children actually enjoy it and they want to do it. We can't force our hobbies, our preferences, our lifestyle, even on our own family, can we, really?
No, exactly. And I think we find exactly the same, especially with Roan being a bit older.
Yeah.
He has that independence, and he will, being 5, you forget things very quickly. So we like going in the forest at this time of year to go look for mushrooms, but he never wants to go. Never. No. And it's a bit steep going down. But if you can get him in there, some shape or form, normally he's very good if we have other people. He won't go on with us, but if he wants, then. And the boy's insane. Like, once he gets in there, finding mushrooms and bugs, and like becomes this little guide and just loves it, and completely forgets that he didn't want to go to the forest. But then the following day, or when you want to go to the forest again, he's no. And it's, oh, you had a lovely
But I
time.
think we can. I think I can relate to that sometimes. The like getting out the door is,
I think on all
is
cases,
the hardest part, and then once you're actually out there, it's just a game changer, isn't it? It's
I think
it's like a reset button.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's for us. Me included. I am very not. I always say I'm a loner. I'm not. I am quite social, but I'm very happy in mine and my family's company, just like our little unit. And that's true. Like, sometimes we'll be up on the farm in summer, for example, 3 or 4 days here, and then one of us, or not me, but Kate will be like, let's go. Oh no, I don't want to. So exactly, we do it as adults as well. And then, like you say, when we go out, it's wonderful. But yeah, I think the world would be a much better place if more children were getting out into it. But you can't force it, and some people don't physically have the opportunity to get out.
Can't force it, but you have to strongly encourage at times. Should we put it that way?
Yeah. I think it was
if we were to literally, every time Rowan says he doesn't want to go into the woods, if we were to just go, oh, okay, then we really would never get in there. And then he'd miss out on those moments when he does finally make it into the woods, and that just switch.
He's halfway up a tree, or in a tree. There's lots of hollow trees that he likes going. But I think it was David Attenborough that said it really succeeded. I think he got asked in an interview, like, when did you get your interest? And I've had that question before. When did you get your interest in nature? But he responded like, I didn't get an interest in nature. Like, we're born with it, from a small person. They're turning over stones, and like everything amazes them. And it's actually, the bigger question should be to the mass population, like, when did you lose your interest in nature? And I think that is a shame we lose, especially living here. Going back to a question you asked really early on about like local support. One thing that's really shocked me, Katie grew up relatively rurally, but I still don't think you saw it to the level we see it here. But living rurally, I am shocked almost daily how disconnected our neighbours are from nature despite living in it, and how everything is a problem. One guy actually said to me recently, okay, if the bichos, like beasts he calls them, that just is all-encompassing wildlife, anything, if it's not causing a problem, okay, but otherwise everything is a problem. And it's really quite shocking, and not only a problem but the fear of it. And I think it's the fear of the unknown. It goes back to that education. And recently the boys did an unofficial forest camp over summer with a lady from town, and she said she runs a nursery in town, and she said what you're actually starting to see, she's been doing it for 30 years, is it's actually the kids from the cities are actually more open to getting muddy and scratched by brambles, and maybe, God forbid, a tick might latch onto them. You can sort it. But she said it's the kids from, and she named it, I'm not going to name the villages because you don't know where they are, but the most rural villages in this area, they're the kids that are more wrapped in cotton wool, is basically what she said. Wrapped, Spanish, I'd never heard the phrase. Obviously, we say wrapped in cotton. I think she said wrapped in lana, which is like sheep's wool, but it's the same thing. Yeah, but they're the ones that, and I don't know why that is. And I think education comes down to a huge thing, that if you're always told that something's bad and scary and muddy, and you don't go out into it, of course, that's what you're going to think about lots of things, like, oh, it's dangerous. Some parents actually said to us, oh, that camp, we heard it's dangerous. The kids come back scratched. Yeah, but our boys come back scratched if they go out in the field here. They're still in shorts now at the end of September. They asked to go in shorts, which is great. And yeah, they do get scratched by brambles, and they haven't, touched wood, broken a leg or anything yet. But if they do, because they're climbing a tree, they'll learn. And also, I'm not going to take those opportunities away from them. And I think they'll grow into freer, more green people, hopefully.
I read a quote by a doctor recently, and I will get the figures completely wrong, but the idea is the same, which is the number of broken bones that he was tending had decreased by something like 70%, but the number of mental health issues he was dealing with had increased by 90%. And he said, the thing is, broken bones are easier to fix than mental health issues. And that really stuck with me. Clearly not well enough, because I can't remember the figures, but you get the kind of the gist of it.
Yeah.
So definitely giving our boys lots of opportunity to break bones. And yeah, ideally they won't, but
Yeah.
I'd rather than
Yeah, the well-being benefits of just being outside, outdoors. Doesn't have to be wild nature, just even in a park or a garden. Completely, all of the studies that have been done on that, and just from your own personal kind of experiences, we know that being outdoors is what humans need. We need to be connected to nature.
It's a huge thing. When I'm guiding and stuff, I try and enforce it as much as possible. Obviously, people will be listening to this potentially with headphones in. But if you're on a walk right now or outside, either pause, maybe don't pause, wait to the end, because I think it'll be the end soon. But just take your headphones out and just sit for 10 minutes, like you say, on a bench. And I think I really try and reinforce that. We know how lucky and fortunate we are to live somewhere like this, and not everyone can do that. But we also have made sacrifices and choices, and we're not earning tons of money, but we live a very rich life through what we can do here. But you can do it. You don't have to have a 30-acre farm. Like you say, you could just go, and if you don't have a garden or even a balcony, exactly, just walk to your nearest green spot, a few trees, and sit down and just see how many birds' songs you don't even need to know the birds. Like, just listen, and hopefully you'll hear some bird
and
song.
find out who manages your local green space, and see if you can volunteer. See if you can get your voice heard on maybe incorporating a little bit of a scrubby area, or a little no mow, that sort of thing. Like, there is the space and the opportunity to get involved.
I think even if you're not physically able to, just to enjoy it. I think going out, and I think a lot of people get put off perhaps by for example, in the bird watching world, going into a hide and there's a load of normally men, and normally older men, in their green clothes with their binoculars and their big lenses and stuff, and perhaps it's not the most welcoming environment, but try not to let that put you off, and you can just learn from the basics and just enjoy looking. Luckily there's technology coming now. We found out the other day, on your phone we can take a picture just with the normal camera of a flower. I haven't tried it on anything but flowers yet. And it identifies it.
Oh, no, I did it on a caterpillar the other day.
Yeah, so it gives you an idea, and then you can Google it.
I do have a mushroom app and a plant ID app, and Rowan loves my plant ID app as well. Like, he loves running around taking photos of plants and getting me to tell him what it is. And I use them as a start point. Obviously, I then will back up that information and knowledge with books, reference books. But if you're out in the field and you don't know immediately what something is, I think that's quite cool to know that you don't need to have those apps. There is actually just on your phone now this way of identifying it.
Yeah, no, it's a great way to use tech for good, isn't it? If any of the listeners were interested in supporting what you're doing, do you run any events? Are you going to be running any events? And you mentioned about obviously the online learning part of it, but are you going to be doing any in-person events in the next year or two?
I would say first and foremost, sign up for our newsletter. So head over to our website, wildfinca.com, and sign up for our newsletter. And there is actually going to be a free treasure hunt. So when you sign up, we'll send you a PDF of a treasure hunt to just get outside and help you connect a bit more with.
For all ages as well.
From 1 to 101. That's what that's
older,
the age bracket.
Older if you're still going.
Yeah, true.
No, not discriminating.
What is the old? Maybe I should change that. What's the oldest
person in the world?
I don't want to discriminate here. It's for anyone. But yes, then we're also doing these kind of online rewilding courses. We're literally about to go into our first one on Monday. It begins, and that's going to be a holistic approach. So it's going to be deepening your knowledge of kind of your surroundings, different habitats, wildlife, but also we're going to be sharing some meditations with you as well, so that you can just sit and experience and look for things that perhaps you haven't seen before. And then also Luke is going to be doing a nature photography course for beginners as well. But all of this will come through on our newsletter. So as a start point, if you just want to learn a bit more about us, I would say please do head over and sign up to our newsletter.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure.
For us too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Curious About Nature. If you would like to keep getting nature and outdoor learning stories and tips, hit subscribe on the podcast so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to give a 5-star rating and review to support our podcast reach. To deepen your child's connection with nature and natural world education, please check out the Nature Curious subscription box. Head over to the website buttercuplearning.com to further support your family's nature journey.